Chapter 2: The Multidimensional Nature of Space. In order to understand the multidimensional nature of the self, it is imperative to understand the multidimensional nature of space and the multidimensional nature of time. An analogy that can be helpful for someone new to this concept is that of a radio or television set that has the potential to broadcast multiple stations and has a dial to tune into different stations. In this analogy, the airwaves represent multidimensional space in that multiple frequencies occupy the same medium and are all being broadcast all at once. The radio can be likened to our brains, which gives us our picture of the world, and the dial is our consciousness and mind. Just because our radio is broadcasting one radio station at the specific frequency we are tuned to does not mean that it is the only frequency available or that other frequencies cease to exist just because our dial is locked into one station. For most people, the dial is jammed as a condition for third-dimensional existence. It has to be that way to allow the mind to focus on one reality to the exclusion of all others until the lesson of that level has been learned. If you think that this is not necessary, you only need to look at those who are deranged and in asylums. The world of psychiatry, like most conventional disciplines, does not recognize the multidimensional nature of space and considers these unfortunate ones crazy when it is that their dials are loose enough through temporal lobe aberrations or other causes that they fluctuate between stations, unable to keep a lock on their home stations. Without sufficient knowledge of the true nature of existence or any kind of spiritual preparations for encounters with other dimensional worlds, these unfortunate ones are considered and consider themselves crazy. While some eventually do lose their minds, a surprising number are quite lucid, just unable to comprehend and assimilate what they perceive, so that even if they did not start out crazy, they most certainly end up there. The point here is that the dials of most people are locked into one station for very good reasons, and in most cases, the dials will only loosen through rigorous spiritual and meditative practices that involve mastering altered states of consciousness. This is often performed over many years, combined with the acquisition of knowledge that will prepare the individual for such multidimensional experiences. Preparation is necessary to be able to change the dial to focus one's consciousness, have other dimensional experiences, and be able to switch back to one's home station and carry on with life as usual, which is a lot more easier said than done because these experiences will forever change the way one views reality. Nothing will ever be the same again. The dedication, time, and patience required for these experiences to occur in a natural way is quite extensive enough that only the most determined will be successful, which weeds out those not willing to make the necessary preparations. The journey from individuated consciousness to the consciousness of oneness involves developing multidimensional consciousness where one becomes someone who walks between worlds and can perceive and function in worlds other than the home world, like the shaman, then return with first-hand knowledge of the greater nature of existence that can be invaluable to the understanding of the world one exists in and facilitate learning the necessary lessons so as to accelerate one's growth. Multidimensional consciousness involves a multidimensional experience of time and space, and for such a being, it's like having multiple dials on the same radio, each one tuned to a different station and being able to process and separate the massive amounts of data being fed every instant. This involves a balancing act of supreme proportions and is a natural progression for consciousness in its evolution. This is the true nature of humanity, the true nature of our ancient ancestors, and the reclamation of this is our destiny. The universe is a unified, holographic, 13-dimensional system. Each dimension exists on a higher frequency of vibration than the one below it, and which dimension one perceives depends on the frequency of one's vibration and the calibration of one's nervous system, temporal lobes, and other instruments of perception. The 5 physical senses and the non-physical senses, two most are familiar with, are the intuitive sense and imagination. The 5 physical senses are what give us our unique perspective on our physical world. No two observers observing the same external event perceive exactly the same thing. Quantum theory postulates that the act of observation and the expectations of the observer determines the outcome that is observed. There is no such thing as a passive observer, and that we are all participants in all we observe. The act of observation is necessary for events to collapse from the imperceptible wave function of the universe into the very perceptible particle function that comprise the physical world we know. The five physical senses function as filters, selectively allowing the perception of certain events that conform to our expectations while preventing the perception of other equally valid events that do not conform to what we expect to see. Yet they occupy the same space. In other words, they align with our expectations so that we see what we expect to see. There are 7 subdivisions within each dimension and innumerable parallel realities in each of these. All potentialities of every single event must be expressed, and that is the nature of parallel realities. Say, for example, one is at crossroads in one's life, where one can either go left, right, forward, or diagonal. At this point, the universe births all the potentials so that whichever direction one chooses is already in existence. It then just becomes a matter of consciousness making its choice as to which of the available options it chooses to experience. To add to the complexity, the self-soul is also multidimensional and branches off parallel selves into each of these options, so that in the larger context of things, all potentialities are experienced by one's truer self. The multidimensional self, even though the physical self is only aware of the choices they made and not aware of the path not taken. This is one of the secrets of reality manifestation, the understanding that intent, choice, and focus is what determines experience. As all probabilities exist in a state of potentia, consciousness is forever in a state of evolution and becoming. Out of that never-ending process, new realities and the parallel versions they birth are constantly being created. Space, like time, is a construct. The existence of one necessitates that of the other, as each becomes the instrument of measurement for the other. Space is conductive due to the presence of the all-pervading ether, which is the common denominator of all dimensions, and it is the foundation for space. It is what separates one frequency dimension of space from the next. The ether is the source of all matter and all that is made manifest. It is also where matter returns to when made unmanifest. It is the medium of conductivity that underlies space and allows for light, sound, and matter to travel from one point in space to another. The ether is also referred to as astral light. Matter is often referred to as nothing more than trapped light, solidified or frozen light. Light, whose frequency of vibration has been slowed down to such a degree that it coalesces, condenses, and collapses into matter. In reality, matter is mostly empty space. Like the universe, as above, so below, the particles of trapped light. Light moving in orbital motion is what characterizes the light in matter and distinguishes it from free-moving light energy, which moves in straight lines, of course. There is no such thing as empty space, and what appears empty to all seeming is filled to the brim by the all-pervading ether. The construct of the physical third dimension is of 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, with time moving in a forward direction only. This is the world our senses are calibrated to perceive, but it is by no means all that exists in space to be perceived. The temporal lobes of the brain function as perceptive filters. They filter out a good portion of the light that enters the pupil for vision and the ears for hearing, directing it to the limbic brain, the feeling center of the brain just above the brainstem, so that feelings are associated with visual, auditory, and other forms of perception. This means that only a portion of the light actually reaches the visual cortex, producing vision, and the occipital lobes, producing hearing. We only perceive a portion of what there is to be perceived and heard. Clairvoyance and clairaudience are the result of the lessening of this filtering function. What makes it possible for multiple dimensions to occupy the same space without intruding upon each other is frequency of vibration at the atomic and subatomic levels. Everything in existence has its own unique vibration, or tone, caused by its atomic and subatomic spin. The differing spins create different degrees of densities, which allow them all to exist simultaneously, occupying the same space without obstructing each other, as they can pass right through each other unencumbered. The higher the dimension, the higher its frequency, and the less dense and more rarefied the gradation of matter that constitutes it. There are 7 gradations of matter, the solid matter we perceive being the most dense, the liquid state less dense and of a higher frequency, the gaseous state even even less dense and higher in vibration, as gas molecules are in rapid motion and more widely spaced. The fourth state of matter is plasma, with 3 more states theorized by science and beyond our perception and instruments of measurement. As in the macrocosm of space, so it is in the microcosm. What appears to us as solid matter is actually anything but. The further one perceives into the microcosm of space, the more space one finds between the smallest particles of matter. There is vastly more space in the atom than the mass of electrons in orbit around its nucleus. One could liken the distance between the innermost electron orbits to that of the outermost planetary orbits. It appears that the further one perceives into the microcosm or microcosm of space, the more space one finds. There is plenty of room for interpretation of multiple reality constructs vibrating at different frequencies. Atomic and subatomic space is filled with the same void as the interstellar void between stars, which is the same void that exists beyond the space-time construct and that cradles it. The apparent solidity of our third-dimensional physical world is illusionary. It is a holographic illusion of light. Something mystics have always been saying, now observable with the invention of the electron microscope, the dimension of space. Time, space, matter, energy, consciousness, and the self, soul, are all intricately linked, and it's really difficult to discuss one without touching upon the others. To understand the multidimensional nature of one involves understanding the multidimensional nature of the other. Due to the simultaneous nature of time, our multidimensional self exists on every dimension there is, even though our perspective is limited to that of the third. You are its twin expression in the third dimension. There is a you that exists in the first, second, fourth, fifth, etc. There is a vertical dimensional axis that originates at the great central sun, the center of the universe and the epicenter of the 13th dimension, that moves through the 12th, 11th, and so on until it reaches the third dimension and comes in through the top of our heads, moves through our bodies aligned with the chakra system, exits, and continues through the earth, grounding us to the core of the planet. The higher dimensions encompass the lower ones and can perceive them, but the lower ones cannot perceive the higher except under special circumstances or by gifted individuals. Also, the lower dimensions are sources of electromagnetic energy for the higher ones. Therefore, quartz crystals can be tools and allies for those in 3D. The first dimension of any dimensional vertical access is the core of the planet that consciousness resides on, which for us would be the crystal inner sun at the core of the earth. This represents the first entry point of consciousness into physicality. It's the densest and includes the mineral kingdom. This is also the dimension that generates the vertical gravity waves and the horizontal electromagnetic waves that anchor and ground our souls in 3D. This is why it is so important to ground ourselves on a regular basis by visualizing a shaft of light moving from the base of the spine through the earth to the center of the core crystal, anchoring it with the breath. On the inhale, sense the light coming into the body from above through the vertical axis, and on the exhale, push it down, anchoring it to the earth's core. An excellent technique for well-being. The consciousness that resides in this dimension is that of the mineral kingdom. The second dimension is what is called the telluric realm, and it occupies the space between the Earth's core and the surface of the planet. This dimension is not as dense as the first, but is denser than the 3D surface world, and it is the realm of the elementals and the spirits of nature that make the elements manifest, the gnomes of the earth that breathe the vital pranic life force into the plant kingdom, without which nothing would grow. The undines, the spirits of water who create the flow, without which water would not flow, blood would not flow, tree sap would not flow. The salamanders, spirits of fire, without which fire would not burn. The sylphs, spirits of the air, without which air could not be, move, or blow. The third dimension is linear space-time existence on the surface of a planet. This includes the plant, animal, and human kingdoms, each existing on a different octave of 3D, exemplified by the differing ranges of capabilities. Here, members of all 3 kingdoms grow through repeated incarnations, moving toward greater and greater complexity, as is the evolutionary imperative. Ultimately, Consciousness is the only reality, and our consciousness is much greater than the boundaries of our bodies. If it were not so, it would not be possible to experience states of consciousness expansion, because what would we be expanding into? An expansion of consciousness is in reality an expansion in awareness of what already exists. It is becoming more aware of what is already in existence just beyond the range of our current perception. In 3D, the first entry point for consciousness is the plant kingdom. After the necessary lessons are learned in this octave of 3D, consciousness graduates into the animal kingdom. This is the first dimension consciousness encounters the construct called time, and only one dimension of it at that. This is by design so that it can learn to master time by experiencing it one moment at a time. Here, linear time is meant to be a teacher of consciousness by giving it unlimited opportunities to see the relationship between the thoughts it thinks and the reality those thoughts manifest. Unfortunately, most of us end up being enslaved by time, never having enough of it, so the servant becomes the master and we end up being mastered by time instead of being the master of it. This is one of the many lessons of 3D, the fact that thoughts create reality. There is nothing in existence that did not begin as a thought in someone, somewhere. Beyond 3D, linear time no longer exists. Time becomes more fluid and malleable, so much so that the thoughts you think manifest instantly. There is no longer the time lag between the thoughts you think and the reality those thoughts manifest, which can be heaven or hell, depending on whether or not you learn the lesson in 3D. Hence the need for thought control, another important lesson of 3D, which the discipline of meditation can be phenomenally helpful in attaining. The catch-22 of the thought creates reality connection is that because linear time slows down the manifestation process, it does create the illusion that there is no connection between the thoughts you think and what you experience. Until one starts to play around with the concept and begin to intend on what one wishes to experience, and as the experience presents itself at some point in the future, one gradually makes the connection with each successful manifestation. There is far more complexity to all this than can be revealed through trial and error, but one point is to be aware of the deeper levels of mind and to make sure that all levels of mind are in alignment about what is intended. The conscious mind has the power of choice as its main strength, while the subconscious works for consistency through repetition. One only needs look to the difficulty one encounters while trying to break habitual behavior to see how powerful the subconscious is. Which is why you can pray and pray until the cows come home, but if your subconscious intentions are not in alignment with your subconscious or unconscious beliefs, desires, and intentions, nothing will happen because the louder voice will always prevail. And while the conscious mind has the power of choice, the deeper levels of mind are overall far more powerful. Linear time is actually a blessing in disguise for evolving consciousness by giving you the time and space to learn the connection between the thoughts you think, the feelings, attitudes, and beliefs you hold, and the realities these invariably manifest. The fourth dimension is the realm of the archetypes, and here time is experienced in its more fluid, simultaneous state, with past and future potentials perceptible in the present, which allows for much more informed decision making. There is little to no time between the thoughts one thinks and the resulting manifestation of those thoughts. Since it exists on a higher vibrational frequency than the physical, consciousness exists in a much less dense form and environment, yet it feels just as solid to its inhabitants as 3D does to its inhabitants. 4D environments is much more thought responsive than 3D, and you can literally change it in any desired manner with a simple, focused thought. All is accomplished by thought here, from movement to communication to manifestation. If you wish to be somewhere, you only need think yourself there. And with a swift sensation of rapid movement, you are there. Depending on distance, it could be in the blink of an eye or slightly longer. The thought responsive nature of the environment is the reason why thoughts must be controlled to some degree, as well as cleaning up the nature and content of one's thought. If you do not wish to have all your negative thoughts instantly made manifest. Its lower octaves include the astral plane that surround the planet and function as a staging ground for the dearly departed and the dearly returning. 4D is an emotionally charged dimension with a positive and negative polarity, just as in 3D. However, unlike in 3D, consciousness exists in a less physical, more energetic environment, even though it feels just as physical from within its structure. So much so that many dearly departed do not realize at first that they have passed on because they find themselves in a physical-like environment within a body that is the exact duplicate of the one they know so well. Consciousness must feed to sustain itself. Within 3D, that food is biological, but in energetic environments, consciousness sustains itself on energy obtained directly from its environment or from others in some form or another. In 4D, one can manifest physical like foods, such like an apple, for example. But this 4D apple will taste like ambrosia compared to a 3D apple. And unlike in 3D, this 4D apple creates no waste products as it is pure energy and is broken down entirely into its energetic components upon consumption, leaving no residue. Since both polarities exist in 4D and it is a highly emotionally charged environment, as all 3D emotional output has nowhere to go but straight up into the 4D environment that surrounds the earth. Those of a positive polarity nourish themselves primarily with the positive range of emotions such as love, compassion, happiness, joy, etc. Those of a negative polarity, on the other hand, nourish themselves with the negative emotions of fear, pain, confusion, anxiety, hatred, etc. Now, when you can understand that each dimension is supported electromagnetically by the one below it, it becomes easy to understand why both polarities in 4D have a vested interest in making sure that those in 3D are producing an abundant supply of the emotions that nourish them. Those in service to self, STS, are of a negative polarity, while those in service to others, STO, are of a positive polarity. And currently, you only need to look at the state of our 3D world and the types of emotions we are being manipulated into generating in mass to see who has the upper hand. As humans are the 3D vehicles for reflective consciousness, the 4D vehicles are the Anunnaki. According to Zecharia Sitchin, in his works interpreting the ancient tablets of Sumeria, the cradle of our current civilization, the Anunnaki are those who from heaven to earth came, and they are the sons of God who came into the daughters of men that ancient texts speak of. They genetically manipulated the DNA of indigenous humans to create a more controllable slave force to mine the gold they desperately needed to repair their damaged planet. This planet, according to the ancient tablets, is said to orbit our solar system in an elliptical orbit that takes 3,600 years to complete one revolution. Even though they exist in 4D under certain conditions, they are able to manifest and function in 3D. They are of a reptilian nature and are master genetic engineers. They are of the STS, negative polarity. Therefore, their actions have been one of pillaging and plundering. They raped Earth of her vital resources and humanity of its genetic heritage. The original human was created with 12 strands of DNA. 2 physical and 10 etheric strands. Through their actions, the 10 etheric strands were disassembled, leaving us with the 2 physical strands we know of. What science refers to as junk DNA that litters every cell are the disassembled strands. The 10 etheric strands served the function of connecting the physical human to its etheric multidimensional self, allowing the human to have multidimensional connection. They did this because leaving us intact would have made us much more difficult to manipulate because we would have been able to see right through their machinations. They are part of the powers that be behind the world we know, and there is currently a divine plan underway to restore humanity to its original nature by reassembling what was rent asunder. It goes without saying that the powers that be are not taking it lying down. They are more determined than ever to retain their covert control over humanity, and the escalating chaos in our world is a reflection of their desperate attempts to maintain control by creating more havoc to fuel themselves. Remember, everything in existence is a frequency. Frequency determines experience, abilities, and range of perception. Therefore, if you can control someone's frequency, you can keep them at whatever level of perception best serves your agenda, without them even being aware they are being controlled and manipulated, because the prerequisite degree of awareness that would have allowed them to see through the controls have been disabled. This frequency manipulation has made it impossible to realize our highest potentials in 3D. The positive polarity of 4D is a realm where magic abounds and where humanity as a species is destined to graduate into. This is also the realm of the fairy, elves, pixies, brownies, and those magical ones who have interacted with our world, and whose world some from ours have visited. They exist on Earth in the fourth dimension, imperceptible to our 3D instruments of perception. However, there have always been those who have learned to perceive beyond the limitations of the five senses, and stories abound in folklore of these magical ones. The fifth dimension can be called the imaginal realm, as it is a dimension where imagination has its own existence apart from consciousness. Imagination, as we experience it, requires us to imagine it. Not so here. A living imagination abounds here, and that does not need another form of consciousness to imagine it, because it has its own consciousness and can imagine itself. The nature of our dream world can give us a clue to this function, because when we sleep, we move through the fourth and fifth dimensions, although unconsciously, where we get recharged. Since we are unconscious, who or what is imagining what we call our dreams that seem so vivid, real, and alive? The fifth dimension is a realm of light and love in its positive polarity, and consciousness expresses as the Pleiadians, who represent a future version of humanity. They are us in future when perceived from our current perspective. But because the past and future are occurring right now in the truer sense of time, they are in existence in our now, even though chronologically, from a linear perspective, they exist in our future. Like the fourth, it has a negative polarity as well. The fifth dimension is the level where all becomes known through the living imagination, which functions as the software that taps into the hardware called the Akashic records of all that is, all that ever was, and all that ever shall be. Time and space are even more thought responsive and variable than in 4D, and the degree to which they exist for consciousness is the direct proportion in the degree consciousness focuses on them. Remove your attention and they cease to exist for you. Matter is much more rarefied, and consciousness exists in what can be referred to as an abode of light, the Adam Kadmon, the original prototype of man created in the divine image. The metaphor of Garden of Eden is a description of the fifth dimensional existence of our origin before the fall. The great fall was not just a fall in consciousness and a decline in ability. It was also a dimensional fall, as we fell from grace in the fifth through the fourth and ended up where we are in the third dimension. Extrapolate on who the serpent that tempted Eve in the metaphor is, and what the motivation would have been to want the Adam Kadmon cast out of Eden and the fifth dimension to end up in the third. The mechanism of the fall is related to sexuality as it exists today. This is why the practice of sexual magic, which is discussed elsewhere in this work, is so important, because it is the doorway back into this Edenic state of the fifth dimension. The sixth dimension is the dimension of sacred geometry, and the last dimension where polarity can exist. Therefore, here is where the dark must merge with the light to move beyond into the seventh. Here, the form consciousness exists within is that of sacred geometry, which means that sacred geometry is conscious. It is the last dimension where consciousness can exist in form. Straight lines in sacred geometry, such as the triangle, square, tetrahedron, cube, represent the masculine polarity, while curved lines like the circle, spirals, and cones represent the feminine polarity. The sixth is where the geometric, morphogenic fields exist. That holds consciousness in form in the lower dimensions. Without these 6D geometric fields, consciousness would literally go out of form in the lower dimensions. Life could not exist on Earth without the 6D crystalline, geometric, morphogenetic fields that exist around the planet. Since they are 6D, you cannot perceive them with 3D senses, but you can measure their presence. It's no secret that the Earth has an electromagnetic field around it, but a similar field exists around everything in existence, animate or inanimate, from the tiniest subatomic particle to the tiniest seed, to humans and animals, to the largest galaxies and the universe itself. These geometric electromagnetic fields are what holds consciousness in form and is the cornerstone to Merkaba science, which will be discussed later in this work. Even the very structure of time and space is held in form by sacred geometry. The geometric shape of the time-space continuum is that of the torus, an archetypal shape found throughout nature. It resembles a donut with a small hole in its center, its eye. The eye of the torus is the doorway beyond the time-space construct into the great void that lies beyond it. Outside of time, outside of space. No time, no space. Beyond all senses of dimensionality. The torus bends length, breadth, and width, thereby folding space in on itself and warping time as it spins and rotates in on itself, and functions as a doorway for consciousness into the time tunnels for time travel. Visualizing the torus spinning and rotating in on itself while concentrating on the eye in a meditative state is a phenomenally powerful way to evolve the brain and mind, especially the temporal lobes, which are intricately involved in multidimensional experiences. Beyond the sixth dimension, consciousness no longer expresses itself through form and becomes formless, non-localized in space or time, everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The past and the future are both occurring right now, and now is the only time ever directly experienced by consciousness. The past and future are both illusions created by our limited perceptions. The past we experienced as a present moment was one probability out of an infinite range of probabilities, and the future we will experience is but one probability out of an infinite range of probabilities. The other probabilities not experienced are what compose parallel worlds where our probable selves do experience those probabilities, so that from a multidimensional perspective, all probabilities are experienced. In a universe of infinite possibilities, every possible outcome to every possible action or event manifests in one reality or another. The outcomes other than the ones we choose are experienced by our probable selves in their reality. It's just as real to them as things are to us. In fact, we are their parallel selves experiencing the outcomes they opted not to experience, and our world is a parallel world to them, seemingly unreal to them, even though it is quite real to us. The understanding of the multidimensional nature of space is crucial to understanding the nature of our higher selves, because this is the part of us that is juggling all these different versions of itself existing in different realities. This is also crucial to understanding the multidimensional nature of time, because not only is the higher self juggling many realities occurring at the same time, but many, many more occurring throughout the time continuum. To understand how this can be, one needs to understand the true nature of time as concurrent, not linear. The higher self, being multidimensional, has the ability to move through time and is functioning throughout the entire time continuum at the same time. Its present moment is an eternal now that contains what it is doing in what we call the past, as well as all the potentials of what it will be doing in what it will be doing in what we call the future. It is the part of us connected to the source of all that is, all that was, and all that will be. The multidimensional nature of time. Time, as we experience it in 3D, is in a linear, sequential, horizontal fashion, one event progressing into the next in a linear, logical manner. The perception of the past moving into the present and the present moving into the future is an illusionary perception of time. Time is already in existence in its entirety. It's not time that moves, but we who are moving through time, one moment at a time. If you think about any event you experienced in what you would refer to as your past, you have to admit that it occurred in a present moment that would now be considered a past moment, and any event you will ever experience in the future will not occur in the future. It will occur in a present moment that lies in what we consider the future. Events can only occur in the present moment because it is the only moment that is real. The past and the future are illusions and figments of our imagination. This understanding is what is referred to as living in the present, focusing on the now, not what has been or what will be. Nothing occurs in the past or the future, only in the present, which is why sequential time is an illusion. The term space-time refers to the linear, sequential, horizontal time we are familiar with, while time-space refers to the non-linear, non-sequential, vertical time, the higher aspects of self-experience. Even though time is a construct Just like space, the more real nature of time is simultaneous with all moments already in existence in an all-encompassing moment referred to by many as the eternal now. This is a moment that is vertical in nature rather than the linear, horizontal timeline we know. In the eternal now, all moments that have ever been or that will ever be are all happening right here, right now, along the vertical axis of time, one moment stacked upon the other ad infinitum, so that consciousness can move up or down its vertical axis into any point in time it chooses to experience. The past and the future are both occurring right now, and now is the only time ever directly experienced by consciousness. The past and the future are both illusions created by our limited perceptions. The past we experienced as a present moment was one probability out of an infinite range of probabilities, and the future we will experience is but one probability out of an infinite range of probabilities. The other probabilities not experienced are what compose parallel worlds where our probable selves do experience those probabilities, so that from a multidimensional perspective, all probabilities are experienced. In a universe of infinite possibilities, every possible outcome to every possible action or event manifests in one reality or another. The outcomes other than the ones we choose are experienced by our probable selves in their reality, and it's just as real to them as things are to us. In fact, we are parallel selves experiencing the outcomes they opted not to experience, and our world is a parallel world to them, seemingly unreal even though it is quite real to us. Beyond 3D, where time is no longer linear, all past and future probabilities to any event or action are perceived in the moment so that the optimum can be selected to be experienced. Multidimensional time is vertical in nature, and in vertical time there is only one moment in time, one moment that encapsulates and encompasses all the other moments, all the moments that have ever been and all the moments there ever will be, stacked on top of the other in a vertical manner so that only one moment exists, and consciousness can move up or down this ladder of time to access any moment it desires. Events are discrete entities in of themselves and have their own existence apart from our perception of them. We link one event to another with our consciousness, which gives us the perception of linear, logical progression. This is pure illusion because logic and reason can only exist within the framework of linear time, where one event progresses in a linear, logical fashion into the next. Outside of that framework, logic and reason becomes meaningless because events just are. They exist in time. It is consciousness that links them together, creating a semblance of order out of chaos. Chaos is the natural order of things, but there is a divine order in chaos. Just look at nature. Everything exists all at once in a chaotic state. Consciousness is what brings order to the natural chaos of everything in existence happening all at once. This is the perspective of Prime Creator. Everything is being experienced all at once in one singular, grand, divine moment. This is why the Creator has already answered your questions and prayers long before you even think to ask. Events exist in what can be termed figures of time. This is one complete image of an event that exists as a 3D fractal, where the images you first see represent the event in its beginning stages. The images in the middle represent the event in its middle stages, and the images deeper into the fractal represents the event in its final stages of completion, so that in one glimpse you see any event in all three stages: past, present, and future. There are three basic experiences of time: linear, sequential, clock time, which we are all familiar with; psychological time, when one is so focused on the present moment to the exclusion of past and future that our experience of time becomes subjective. We have all heard the expression, "time flies when you are having fun," as well as having experienced it. Likewise, when engaging in an activity we would rather not be engaged in, bored senseless, our attention wanders off into things we would rather be doing or what we would like to be doing, once the unengaging activity is over and the result is 1 hour seeming like an eternity. The third experience of time is simultaneous or vertical time. This is the experience of time that our higher selves experience. It is also called the eternal now, because it is an expanded moment that contains all of time. An analogy that may be helpful in understanding the nature of vertical time is that of an infinitely long road where while you are on it, you cannot see its beginning or end, and the points behind you representing where you have been or your past, while the points ahead representing where you are heading or your future. Even though the road extends before you and you cannot perceive beyond a certain point, the areas you cannot perceive are already in existence now, and the areas that you have already passed, even though you can no longer perceive them, are still in existence. If one could rise high above the road to gain a bird's eye view, one would be able to see much further ahead and behind. This is what the perception of vertical time is like, and is what allows for prophecy. The multidimensional self can move up or down the vertical axis of vertical time to any past or future time. This is experienced as moving through a tunnel or wormhole at superliminal speeds, and when at the destination, collapses back into the horizontal linear time of that reality. Time and space are the same thing. To move through time, you are moving through space at unbelievable speeds. Each moment in time has its own unique space vector. This is how come the past still exists and the future already exists. In reality, it is not time that is moving, but our consciousness that is moving through space, giving us the experience of time passing. On the subject of prophecy, one needs to be aware that because of the nature of probabilities, the only real, actual, knowable time frame is now. The past and future, even though in existence right now, exist as a series of probabilities, and which one is experienced depends on choices made by consciousness along the way. Therefore, in our analogy of the road, any prophecies made from observations of what lies ahead on the road is only one set of probabilities, and if one could rise high enough above the road, one could perceive an infinite number of other roads, other timelines, running parallel to the original one. Any prophecies made would be one set of probable futures, because consciousness can jump from one road to another based on its choices, decisions, and actions, thereby creating a whole new set of probabilities for itself, nullifying the previous ones that existed on the previous road it was on. The point of power is always in the present moment, for it is in this time frame that we select what futures we will experience, never in the past or future. Therefore, we are never at the mercy of our past unless we believe we are. If we don't like where we have been or where we are going, every present moment offers us the opportunity to change, provided we can let go of the past and what has been. Because holding on to it is what guarantees we will keep on reliving it. The present moment is always the point of power to affect change, not the past or future. Being in each present moment as completely as you can, therefore, is as close as you can come to the eternal now state that is simultaneous time. Each present moment is a doorway into eternity. When you do finally transcend the linear time in any one of the various ways that can be accomplished, it will be from a present moment. The Creator recreates existence each and every single moment. This is why each moment is complete unto itself, with all the elements necessary for its completion contained within it. Each moment can also be expanded to include all the other moments that have come before it and that will come after it, making it an eternal moment. This is the experience of eternal now. You become aware of all the moments in existence and their probabilities. Which ones you choose to focus on and make your experience is entirely up to you. Understanding the nature of probabilities, one realizes that every possible outcome to every possible event must manifest, play itself out on one level of reality or another. This does not mean that the you know yourself to be must experience them all. Free will gives the power to choose one experiences consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously. It is the simultaneous nature of time that allows for time travel, which can be accomplished physically through technology and non-physically through soul travel, because the soul is multidimensional in nature, existing in a multitude of realities all at once, of which the you know is the aspect of your soul that exists in 3D. Once the physical consciousness is freed from the constraints of the physical body and the limitations of the five senses, Observational transcendence of time and space can be accomplished, allowing for time travel, and this is how many of the ancient seers were able to make their prophecies. What it seems a lot of them did not understand was the nature of probabilities, because they present their prophecies as absolutes, when they only represented the probable outcomes if things continued along the same path, or the probable outcomes of a parallel timeline. Consciousness has a divine right to change its mind, and everything else has to change accordingly, thereby nullifying what would have been and the prophecies based on them. For those who doubt that physical time travel is possible, I would suggest researching the Philadelphia and Montauk experiments, where the US government, working with Nikola Tesla, using hyperspace technology, were able to send an entire battleship, the USS Eldridge, through hyperspace 40 years into the future through the opening of a wormhole in the time-space continuum. Many factors were not taken into consideration, and those who participated paid a very heavy price. There is a great deal of information available on these experiments from those who participated for those interested. Time is relative to the space between objects or events. To alter time without motion, change the amount of space between two objects or events by folding the space between the 2 points. This is the mechanism through which the Merkaba travels through space and time, and the technology by which those who journey vast interstellar distances accomplish it in very little time. The Merkaba is the fifth-dimensional, interdimensional vehicle of spirit that can translate body and soul from one place to another or from one time to another. It has the shape of a flying saucer, and there are two types: the living, organic Merkaba of spirit, which is also called the light body, and the synthetic, metallic type of spaceship, which is utilized by those not connected to spirit. The synthetic type copies the same counter-rotating fields of the natural type to warp space and bend time, allowing for travel. Time and space simply cannot be separated, and in order to truly understand one, you need to understand the other, and understand that they are not one and the same thing. This understanding goes a long way in understanding the multidimensional self. All of existence is in motion. The particles in orbital motion comprise matter, while those moving in straight lines comprise energy. That which moves, which all of existence does, exists within which remains unmoved, the great void. All of existence is in existence right now in a completed state, in a state of potentia. It is from this completed state that creativity, intuition, and imagination spring from. Motion, however, is pure illusion. It is the illusion of movement from one point in space to another. Understanding the mechanics of motion pictures and holograms will provide an excellent insight into how the illusion of physical reality is manifested and maintained, because physical reality is a 3D holographic motion picture. As with any movie, the question is, who is the director? Physical reality and the perception of linear time is an illusion created by extremely rapidly moving 3D holographic frames, moving from frame to frame at something close to light speed. Much too fast for the instruments of perception of the human form, much like a movie is to its audience, so that the illusion of motion and movement is created. If you can slow down the speed of the film, the speed you are moving from frame to frame, you can learn to stop the motion and stop your experience of time. All the moments that have ever been or that ever will be, and all their probabilities, are already in existence now. It is not time that is moving, but our consciousness moving in its experience from moment to moment, giving the illusion of time passing. One really needs to invert one's way of seeing it to get a handle on this concept. It requires major rethinking of how one thought things were. Meditation slows down time because it slows your consciousness down. It slows down the speed you are moving through the frames of the physical world, allowing you to perceive more and see things in a way you normally would not. A particularly powerful meditative technique that can help slow down time to allow you to stop it so you can move beyond it, either in form or observational time travel, using soul travel as a launchpad, is the swinging pendulum. In a deep meditative state, you visualize a swinging pendulum before you at whatever distance seems appropriate, and a pendulum of whatever size is most comfortable. Allow your consciousness to follow it as it swings left and right, faster and faster, then begin to slow it down until you stop it in the midpoint. Experiment with different distances and different pendulum sizes from small to a massive one, swinging on the horizon of the landscape in your mind's eye. This is an excellent meditative technique to begin to slow down time to eventually stop it, by stopping the speed of the holographic film of reality. A great book with excellent insights on the nature of time is Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Itzhak Bentov. In it, he discusses how motion is characteristic of all that is relative and how stillness is characteristic of the absolute. How an object at total rest, completely still, is also moving at infinite speeds. How total rest and infinite speeds are synonymous. When you are moving at infinite speeds, you are everywhere at once, non-localized in space or time. The pendulum has two still points on either end of its swing. It comes to a complete stop before it begins to move in the other direction. At these points, it tunnels out of time and space at infinite speeds. Being everywhere at once takes no time at all, then collapses back into local space-time before beginning to move in the other direction. With a scientific quantum mechanical understanding of the mechanics of the pendulum, it becomes easier to see how you can train your consciousness in meditative states to use the momentum of the pendulum at its still points as a launch pad for movement beyond linear time-space. The pendulum can be very powerful. The pendulum can be a very powerful tool by opening gateways to the non-local, non-localized in time or space for soul travel, to move through time and even beyond it. Granted, that level of use can only come in time and with practice, but immediate benefits can be attained in gaining better control of an unruly mind with invasive, distracting thoughts. Attaining a degree of dominion over the mind is imperative to productive meditation, and the pendulum can be a great way to slow down the mind and the constant stream of thoughts, which is the foundation to the more exciting activities. 1 second of linear time contains an incredible amount of moments, also called nanoseconds. Consciousness is moving through so rapidly that the physical consciousness does not even perceive it. The multidimensional one does. The aspect of the present moment that is the gateway to eternity is the nanosecond. Mastering time involves understanding the secrets of the nanosecond. Technology can be invented that will splice time much like the computer does, allowing for tremendous activity within the second, which will take you into the resonance of the nanosecond, or you could work with the pendulum and the computer that the mind is, combined with the force that is the laser-like focused consciousness, and open your own portals to the nanosecond and its portals to what lies beyond time. Mastering time also involves mastering the various levels of mind. At first, we will attempt to master time by controlling time, and that's near impossible. The secret lies in mastering your mind, and then time ceases to exist for you as an objective reality, for time will bend to the will and the mind. It is the mind functioning through the brain that gives our consciousness the experience of linear, sequential time. Fine-tune the functioning of the mind. It will function differently, giving you a very different experience of reality and of time, subjective and objective. The talons of time. To conclude this discussion on time, here are some food for thought from The Talons of Time by Paul Twitchell, the founder of Eknar. The Science of Soul Travel is a remarkable piece of work with unique insights into the workings of this enigma called time. There is no such thing as time, only duration, which is closely related to existence, though not the same. Duration implies existence. Existence does not imply duration. Duration is a continued existence and is established constantly. Duration is the persistence of being in existence. Duration does not deal with time, but movement, which is usually continuous. Movement, meaning successive stages in the passage between 2 points, excluding instantaneous change. Movement can be qualitative or quantitative. Quantitative movement is local motion, the passage of your body from one place to another through space. Qualitative movements are alterations in thoughts and things. Movement consists of space covered in a given moment of time. It does not consist of time itself. The concept of time involves the concept of movement, but not identified with it. There must be something in motion, which is the essence of time. Without motion, there could be no experience of time. It would be possible to foresee what would happen in each event, for the future of any event must be contained in the present, and nothing new would be added to them. To manifest an image, the image must not be in the future. The future does not exist. It must be in the present time with the motion of feeling, emotion, energy in motion. When you are conscious of movement, you are aware of time. But when you are unconscious of movement, you are unaware of the passage of time. Your measurement of time is made by using some unit of motion or change as a standard. The movement of our sun and planetary system, the stars, tides, clocks. Time, when viewed as the abstract cause of all actual movements, past, present, and future, occurring in the existing worlds, is true time. Viewed as the effect of all possible movement, it is false time, for it consists of past, present, and future. In the fourth dimension, time stands still. There is no movement as the third dimension would know it. You do not age or die. Time is the abstraction made by the mind from concrete movements that actually occur in our world. Thus, time consists in its totality in the past, present, and future. The past is no more. The future is not. One can only live in the present, which is the only way to exist and hold off old age. The illusion of all mankind. To grasp the totality of past, present, and future, the mortal mind is required to think of all these movements as one, simultaneously, and put them into a unity. The present must be the point of termination for the past and the future, situated between the two at the end of one and the beginning of the other, consisting of an indivisible instant connecting the past and future. Time, as duration for the eternal being, is that which consists of movement considered in its succession according to before and after. Time as an objective reality is a false image. Time itself is only a relation. If there is no change in creation, then there is no change in time. Thus you have duration. Existence can be destroyed. Duration never. Continuous existence is found only in movement. Movement containing the parts of past, present, and future knows no pause or rest. Change then shows what belongs to time. It is the modus operandi upon which the two poles of time works, that of the beginning and the ending. Through our thoughts, we break up the space-time continuum into space and time. Our thoughts have become space-bound and cannot get any grip on concepts outside space and time. The movement of time is largely within us. Time vanishes when its origin is sought. As there is no objective world, so there is no objective time. Time is outside every before and after. If one must overcome time, then he must place himself in the center of his mental picture and act it out as though he were the author, actor, and director of the action, which of course he is. With an expanded understanding of the multidimensional nature of space and time, one is now in a much better position to understand the multidimensional nature of the self. However, there are other dimensional aspects to the physical self that must also be understood and assimilated on the journey to completion. Before the physical self is in a position to merge with and allow the complete incarnation of the higher self, it must gather itself into a cohesive unit. There are parts of oneself that have been left behind in the growing up process that must be healed and incorporated. So let us now look at these.